With the release of the 8.4 patch, one change has been causing quite a kerfuffle, and it has nothing to do with either of the new characters or any of their perks. In Behavior's quest to remove blood point bonuses from every perk in the game, they made a small oversight that's proving to have a massive impact. Enter HEX Thrill of the Hunt. For every totem standing, a 14% debuff is applied to all totem interactions. When combined with other strong hexes, it can create a serious snowball effect if survivors don't address it early, and will almost certainly lose you the game if you ignore it entirely. This change is likely to get nerfed soon, but in the meantime, survivors need strategies to handle it, and that's what we're here to discuss today. Before we get started, if you still haven't encountered it yourself, there's a video link below that showcases exactly how strong this build is when it's used by a good killer. But rest assured, it's only a matter of time before it finds you. The most important question is, why do we need to cleanse the totems at all? It's a big waste of time getting rid of these, so what could possibly go wrong if we just slam gems and stealth around the map? I'll tell you, it's these two perks, Devour Hope and Face the Darkness. I'm sure we all know how much of a problem Devour is, essentially bringing the game to a halt to cleanse it before it gets too strong. It isn't revealed until all survivors become exposed, so it always catches you off guard, and if you haven't gotten Thrill of the Hunt out of the way first, you'll be lucky to avoid an early death. This wouldn't necessarily be a problem if you could hide from the killer, but that's where Face the Darkness comes in. Once a survivor becomes injured, a dull totem lights and every other survivor screams every 25 seconds, revealing their auras so long as they're outside the terror radius. If both of these perks are active, there's no way to cleanse any totems because you'll scream, interrupting your progress and making you start over. If this happens, it's up to the survivor who activated Face the Darkness, as they're the only one who won't scream. It's something all survivors need to be aware of, because those who aren't risk losing every game for their team. But what can we do to prepare? There's one perk that anyone who's ever wanted a totem build has probably already heard of and used before, but for the uninitiated, let me introduce you to Detective's Hunch. Whenever a generator is completed, the auras of all totems, as well as generators and chests within 64 meters, are revealed to you for 10 seconds. For gamers like myself with no object permanence, you might as well run a blank perk slot, because how are you supposed to remember all that information in only 10 seconds? Well, I'm glad you asked. You read the rest of the perk description. If you're holding a map, everything revealed is added to it. Boom! As far as perks go in terms of complexity, it doesn't get much simpler than this. And when it comes to deleting totems, it's head and shoulders above the rest for reasons we'll talk about later. It's a great choice because there's basically no barrier to activation. The only way it never gets any use is if you get 4K'd at 5 gens, but how often does that really happen? This makes it arguably the easiest perk to use in the entire game, but if you can think of a better one, put it down in the comments below. On top of that, you have to change very little when it comes to playstyle. Perks like Strength in the Shadows, for example, require you to drastically change your priorities if you want to get any use out of it. You'll always be looking for safe passes to the basement anytime you get injured, and can occasionally get you killed as a result. With Detective's Hunch, it really is business as usual. When the trial starts, you do you. Stealth until the killer patrols by, jump on the first generator you see, or run at the killer and take chase to spare your solo queue sallies. It really doesn't matter, as long as the first generator pops, you're gonna get value. Once that happens, now you've got all the info you need for the entire rest of the match. You can see every totem, which we'll get to in a second, but you can also see all the generators as well. It's like having deja vu, minus the 6% repair buff, but you see all the generators instead of just the 3 closest together. You can use this to make macro plays, ensuring the killer never has a chance to hold a 3-gen, and increasing your chance of survival exponentially. Should you ever need a medkit or anything else from the recently buffed chests, you know where all the boxes are as well. Jumping back to totems, Thrill of the Hunt reveals itself to survivors as soon as you interact with your first totem. So once your map has gathered all the info, make your way over to the nearest totem and give it a quick tap to see if Thrill is in play. If it is, it's time to get to work. You can either start with the dull totems to lower the debuff for when you actually find the hexes, but more optimally, you should run around and start with a hex totem, and here's why. Cleansing any totem opens the door for Hex Pentimento, so you might as well take a chance removing something important as opposed to just giving the killer the option unnecessarily. That's actually the main reason why Detective's Hunch is better than Counterforce. Once the first totem falls, you'd normally gain a 20% totem cleansing speed buff, but Pentimento rekindles the totem, bringing Thrill back to 5 stacks and removing your buff entirely. On top of that, Counterforce does nothing to help you with finding the first totem to get the ball rolling. So if your map knowledge isn't what it once was, there's a chance you go the entire trial without seeing any totems at all. Since we're dogpiling at this point, the last reason Detective's Hunch is superior has to do with efficiency. Counterforce shows you the aura of the furthest totem following any cleanse, meaning you're quite literally being sent on a wild goose chase in the most inefficient way possible, while only even seeing the next totem's aura for 4 seconds. That brings back the object permanence issue I mentioned before, as trying to remember the exact location of something across the map while also avoiding the killer and not sandbagging your teammates is about as difficult as it sounds. Obviously, this doesn't affect everyone, but it affects me, so that's why I bring it up. As for the other options when it comes to cleansing totems, you're extremely limited. It's either small game or better than new, which hardly counts as it applies the buff to a teammate instead of yourself. Putting a task as important as this in the hands of another just isn't going to end well, believe me. As for small game, I think I've already talked about it more than it deserves. Just don't. So that's all the tips and tricks I can give when it comes to managing totems in Dead by Daylight. But all we have so far is one perk in an item. That's hardly a build, so let's keep going. When it comes to item add-ons, there's only a few worth considering, so let's cover them quickly. The crystal and glass bead add-ons allow you to share your info with the rest of the team by either creating a beacon for your friends to flock to, or by literally showing them everything you're seeing. Beyond that, the jelly and addendum add-ons increase how long your map is usable for by slowing down the rate at which its charges are consumed, or by just adding more charges. Just make sure you use one bead and one stack add-on, as any other combination might be less effective overall. Now for the perks. If you really want the most optimal way of breaking bones, there's nothing stopping you from running Detective's Hunch and Counterforce. On the other hand, that's half a build dedicated to something that's not guaranteed to happen, so use this at your own risk. I prefer pairing it with Iron Will and Resilience to ensure I can move from totem to totem undetected, while also getting a nice 9% boost to cleansing. It ain't much, but it's honest work. When it comes to exhaustion perks, I tend to avoid them if I'm using Iron Will, but Balanced Landing and Overcome would be my go-to. There's almost always a totem spawn on a hill or on the second story of a building, so you can reliably use it to get out of danger. Overcome, on the other hand, is just nice to have. The extra 2 seconds of sprint after getting hit gives you major distance and allows you to get to a safe tile where you can loot to your heart's content. Inner Strength might be the best perk to pair with it, giving you up to 5 heals that completely bypass slowdowns like Hemorrhage and Mangled, and up to 10 if Pentimento is in play. Plot Twist would be good for the same reason, if it didn't conflict with the actual best perks to pair with Detective's Hunch, those of course being the boon perks. Blessing a totem instead of cleansing it is the only way to counter Pentimento completely, but it comes at the cost of taking twice as long when you bless a Hex. Over 90 seconds, which is notable because that's how long it takes to finish a generator by yourself. I'm struggling to see any situation where blessing a Hex while Thrill is active would ever be worth it, so focus on removing that first over everything else. As for which boon in particular is best, it's really up to preference. I mentioned that one conflicted with Plot Twist, that being Boon Exponential. It doesn't offer any direct synergy in helping you remove the totems, but it does make slugging more difficult for Killer, which is something that's been happening a lot more in the recent months. There's no reason why they should conflict, by the way, so Behavior, if you're listening, get on that. Beyond that, all the other boons are great options besides Illumination, because you'd basically just be blessing a totem to get a map. Not ideal if you're already carrying one. As always, if there's anything I missed, please share it in the comments down below. I love reading about new stuff I'd never even considered before, so don't hesitate to spread the knowledge. So it's easy to see why Hex Thrill to Hunt is so strong right now. It takes very little effort for the killer to keep their totems lit, while also requiring a very coordinated team of survivors to beat it. That's just not something you're going to get consistently if you're playing solo queue. So use this knowledge I've shared in the video and take charge as the leader your team deserves. It might be the only way you make it out alive. If you made it to the end, be sure to subscribe. I love making these videos, and when you guys support them like you did with the last one, it only motivates me to make them even better. If you love learning about perks and synergies, here's a video about how to choose perks and make builds for the hell that is solo queue Survivor. Until next time, take care out there in the fog.